This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 240, Corvid19. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Hopefully everyone listening is staying healthy and remembering to wash your damn hands. As the world deals with the coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, we thought it would be interesting to talk about how this global issue is impacting our day-to-day. Before we do that, let's check in with our hosts. Nick, what's going on with you?
Hello, everybody. I'm thinking long-term, and so we're in dealing with the coronavirus, we're planning on going out less. So like my wife and I spend a lot of time going to the movie theater, going out to eat. And so I've got a big backlog of Lego that I've been wanting to build forever. And so I might start digging into some of those kits. Still don't really have room to place them, which is why there is a backlog. But I figure it's still a good thing to keep me occupied. Get some good card games. My wife and I like to play Canasta, Skippo, Uno, that kind of stuff. So we've got some games planned in the next upcoming weeks.
I imagine I'm going to be playing a lot more Monopoly at home in the next week or so. So for me, we're recording at 4:00 on a Friday. And while looking at this, trying to figure out what my weekly update should be, it's going to be to hawk this beer that I'm drinking, which is from a brewery in Portland, Maine, called Definitive Brewing Company. The beer is called Baby Steps, and it's a double milk stout with toasted coconut. And if you like dark beers, it is awesome. I recommend it. Also, in preparedness, Nick's getting Legos. I have like 2 cases of this in my basement, so I think I'll be in good shape. What about you, Steven? What's going on?
That will take care of you for a week, John. What about if you're in there for 2 weeks?
I can stretch it. We'll stretch it.
So what's up with me? It's a crazy week with everything going on with the closings and everything just changing, working from home. Big change for me and Nick, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not too much different for us.
Yeah. But it's funny because I think in maybe the last episode or last couple of episodes, I talked about getting a Nintendo Switch. I did buy it. And I can't believe how awesome that thing is. I'm not even a gamer. I've never played computer games really. Couldn't. Nick was asking me what kind of games do you like, and I'm like, I have no idea. But I have been having a ball with that thing, and it's like perfect timing. My daughter's spring break was canceled, and college is closed until April, so she's gonna be coming home here in probably the next 5 minutes.
Don't tell them that you have a Switch.
Well, I'm excited because she'll have a video game to play with because we never really had them in the house.
You should try to pick up Mario Party. That's a good, easy multiplayer family game type thing.
Yeah, I was thinking today I'm going to allow them to choose one game that we buy, while they're home. So we can. I've been playing Untitled Goose Game. I think that's what it's called.
Oh God, yes. The game's hilarious.
It was hilarious and fun. I've already finished it. It took me, I did it in like 3 or 4 nights playing with it. Never thought I'd be into games, but it's actually been a really great stress reliever for me. Just kind of doing something different.
I'll send you, I'll put this in the show notes too, but there's a yearly charity organization that does speedrunning of games where the goal is to finish as quickly as possible. And they raise millions in charity for Doctors Without Borders and the Prevent Cancer Foundation and a couple other charities. But this last one just happened in January, and one of the games that they ran was Untitled Goose Game.
Was it?
And so it's one of those things. One of the great things about speedrunning is, you said you played that over a few nights. I think they beat the game in 13 minutes or something like that.
Like I'm gonna go back, now that I finished it, I'm gonna go back and see how long it takes me to go through the whole thing in one sitting. I could probably do it in a couple of hours, I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how some of these, like there's games like Breath of the Wild took me 110 hours before I beat the final boss. And there's somebody that speed ran it in 27 hours straight. I mean, he stayed up all night and everything, but like, they do some pretty amazing things, and a lot of it's for charity. So it's a good cause.
Stick that in the show notes, Nick.
We'll do. So this week, we only have one story, but it's a little bit different than most of our stories. It's not really a news article or anything like that. I found a resource that was incredibly helpful for me in the Drupal world. So we all know that the L function has gone away, and you use various methods to create links in Drupal, and I can never remember which particular combination to use in a specific situation. Whether you should use link create from route or link from text and URL. And there's just a bunch of different options. And so there is the Agaric Co-op, which is semi-local. A couple of the people at least started around here. I think they've moved around the country at this point. But there's a blog post from a couple of years ago that goes through and gives you just a ton of different examples on how to create links, using something from a user input, using a URI, so using a URL fragment, using an external link, linking to an internal path that doesn't have a route, like the robots.txt. It's a fairly concise blog article, and it is just incredibly helpful when you just can't remember specifically the way to generate a link for something. And I just kind of happened to stumble on it this week because I knew I had to use the URL, and I just couldn't quite remember which service had to be put in there. And when I was Googling, I found this, and I will never lose this blog post again. So we'll put that in the show notes. And if you're creating links, this is a good resource to check.
It's also worth saying, like, one thing that we point out in our code review is, in different files, right? When you're linking to something, if you're linking to like the alias, for example, that's like ill-advised because aliases can change. So
yep.
a lot of times I notice like the first thing in this article is talking about like the canonical, the entity node canonical, and feeding it a node ID and having it populate the link. And that's like super helpful too if you're trying to basically link to a certain entity but not use the alias, but still use the alias, if that makes any sense. So definitely something that's super helpful, I think.
Yep.
So moving on to our primary topic, I'd like to preface this by saying that, obviously coronavirus should be taken seriously. We're not medical professionals. So,
Speak for yourself, John.
I'm not a medical professional.
Okay.
I'll speak for myself as well. I am not either.
So, definitely, follow best practices in protecting yourself against the virus. But we're going to not so much focus on that stuff, but focus on the impact to our day-to-day, our businesses and events that we may attend. So
one of the things about this show is that each of the episodes usually reflects what's going on in our lives in some way, right? You can look at any topic on any week and say, John must have been doing this that week or dealing with that this week. And this is what we're dealing with, as we sit here. We just finished watching a press conference from the president, 5 minutes before the show. So it's all fresh in our heads here.
Yep.
And I think, one of the things that we're seeing is impacting a couple of different areas. I think the first is the business impact. So I know here at OOMF, we are moving to a fully remote working team for the next couple of weeks. So, nobody's going to be in our Providence headquarters. Everybody's going to be working from home. I know we're seeing a lot of, in the Drupal community, we're seeing a lot of conference cancellations or going virtual.
One of the things that I think is going to be interesting about this is I'm curious. I think working from home is a great move by OOMF. I know a lot of companies are doing this. One of the things that I'm interested about is to see long term how many companies realize that this kind of work it works to work from home. That employees are just as productive or more productive working from home than they are in the office. And I'm curious as to how many companies will just end up closing their offices at some point or downsizing their offices, because sometimes it's good to have a conference room or something, to meet in person. But I'm curious, long term, how many companies will maybe go the way of Lullabot, be fully distributed and just kind of go with it. I mean, aside from lower overhead from not having the offices, if companies move that way, they're better protected from a situation like this disrupting things in the future. So if there's another pandemic, hopefully not, but say 10 years down the road, instead of having to go through this, dust off these, practices, some companies will already be fully remote and it just won't, the impact will be lower. I mean, I've obviously been work from home for 12 years as Stephen has been working from home for a long time, but I'm curious to see how this will work. How many companies will just decide like it's a better way.
We have an advantage here, right? In that we work in an industry where, and for organizations, at least the three of us, that, we're equipped to work from home. I know OOMF has done some tests in the past of long-term, everyone work from home scenarios where it becomes I think a little more challenging. Like in the agency I'm working at in the federal government, they have most of the people in my department have 1 day a week they work from home. So there's a bit of an advantage there, but that is not the same as being working from home for five days in a row or for a month. And getting a little taste of just being home for 1 day with your laptop, you can deal with it. But if you're 8 hours a day in your home, there's a lot of things you need to consider, right? You need to consider, do you have the equipment that you need? Are you working on a laptop on just a screen? Do you have external monitors to work with? Do you have a comfortable chair? Do you have a space that's quiet and comfortable? Do you have kids running around you? There's a big difference between like working home every once in a while and being there for a month. And I think that's what is also going to be interesting that people see during this period of time.
Yeah, there's also other challenges that aren't, that are work related, but not specifically work related. And I think we'll probably bring them up a couple times, but I know that Lullabot gave a talk about this. And when you're remote, extra effort has to be expended to make sure the team is a team, and that that people have a chance to have quote unquote water cooler time. To chat, maybe gossip a little bit, on harmless subjects, and get to know each other personally. Because that leads to a more cohesive team. That leads to more, that leads to better work. People feel more at home and able to reach out and ask questions when they need to, when they know each other like that. And that's not something that comes naturally as when you're remote. Whereas when you're in an office, you get up to get a cup of water or something, or go to the kitchen and you pass somebody, you can say, hey, how was your weekend? You could chat with them about that. So that's definitely something, it's definitely something that I think will be interesting that will come out of this, to see how different people solve that issue.
The other interesting aspect here too is the kind of, and Nick was touching on this earlier with working from home specifically, but like the virtual preparedness of companies and especially educational institutions. I know a lot of schools are trying to go virtual, and they're in the process of working through like school virtualization plans. Like, how do we virtualize our school so our, if we have to be out of school for an extended period of time, our students can still learn. And I think that plan, right, is going to be kind of like baptism by fire at this point for a lot of places. But I think it'll be interesting to see how those plans grow and how technology can help with that.
I have to say, I don't envy, at the top, I don't envy the sysadmins at Zoom right now, because while I think this is going to be a banner month for that company, I can't imagine the amount of strain. I mean, Zoom really we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the show, but Zoom really has stood out to me over the last few years as one of the best remote videos software.
We will talk about this, but I will say to your point, I asked, I was talking to my wife today, and I was like, well, what do you guys use for conferencing software? And she's like, oh, GoToMeeting. So, I mean, like, Citrix is still very, very much used by a lot of large companies. But let's keep going down our agenda. We're going to talk about remote tools a little bit later, but let's dive into the cancellation of conferences and events, right? So obviously in the Drupal community, we have a ton of events. We have a ton of conferences. The communication on DrupalCon has been pretty good as to, hey, we're not making any moves yet, but we'll check back in a couple of days or in a week to let you know where we stand. But,
when is DrupalCon?
DrupalCon is May 19th through the 22nd or something to that effect. But just today, I received an email that Design for Drupal, our local Drupal design conference here in Boston, Massachusetts, was canceled because they're, based on the email, the venue is a college campus, and they were working to limit events on the campus, even though this event is in June. So, we are seeing other events like MidCamp, for example. MidCamp's a big Drupal event that they're actually going virtual. They're not canceling. They're going virtual, along with Nerd Summit. So, it works out well, because now if you want to go to both conferences, you can technically kind of go to both conferences online. But Steve and I were talking earlier, and some of this is going to be a learning experience for those camps, right? Because they have a very short window to kind of organize their camp to go from a physical environment to a virtual environment. So there are potential pitfalls there, right?
So, and I think one of the unfortunate things is that Drupal camps, the biggest value of any Drupal camp, you ask anyone that goes to them, is being face-to-face with people.
Absolutely.
A lot of people don't even attend a lot of the sessions. It's the camaraderie and the networking. The moment you go virtual, you have now turned yourself into basically a YouTube channel. And we are already recording sessions and putting them online. So you're losing out the biggest value of the camp is really the interaction and the face-to-face, which is just so unfortunate.
We'll have to reach out to Avi and Kevin and see if we can get them on to talk about that after their conference. I'd be interested to see if there is like a Zoom room for the hallway track. Like, oh, hey, here's the hallway track room.
So I get that.
Yeah, but that's still not.
I know that people are talking like, let's have the after party online. I'm like, I'm on my computer all day long. The value of going to the conference is getting away from the computer. So no,
absolutely.
And do networking, like we're all on Slack all day. That to me, it just misses the whole thing, right? It misses the whole thing.
The sponsors are going to mail everybody a beer. It's going to be great. Yeah, don't worry about
it. It's so unfortunate. I feel bad for these two camps, and I know they're both putting it in the stress it's putting on the organizers is immense, right?
Yeah.
In a matter of weeks.
Yep.
Adding a ton of work to themselves and a lot of risk to their camp by making this happen. And I give them all the credit in the world for pushing forward and making it happen. But it's just horrible because those camps, they work on them all year and they're about an experience. They're not about sitting on a computer screen.
Also makes you think. Go ahead, Nick.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I also like just to point out, I think that they're making the right decision. I think it's a difficult decision, but I think not having an in-person, whether you're canceling or whether you're going virtual, I think not having the in-person conference is the prudent thing to do. Is the thing to do that's best for the community, best for the country, best for the people. And so it's definitely, I can't imagine making that decision. Actually, I guess I can't imagine that because we'll have to make that decision for NedCamp at some point. But it's definitely a difficult decision. But I think that they're definitely going about it the right way.
They could not keep the camps just in the climate in the last. You just look at. We're recording this on what's today, March 11th? No.
13th.
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
I mean, if you look just past the 7, just go back 1 week, how things have changed, right? We don't know what 7 days from now is going to bring us. So they both did the absolute prudent thing of canceling the in-person conference.
But the other aspect too is the event planning and the funding that goes into these camps, right? So there could be a potential loss of funding. I know for us at NedCamp, we have had delays on the contracting side because our venue is a university and they're busy dealing with the current events and dealing with closing of the university and going virtual. I mean, events like the Boston Marathon, right? There are thousands of people that come into the city of Boston for this event, and they've moved it from when it normally is in, I believe, April to September. So, that's a huge shift.
Yeah.
I think this is, I agree with Steve that, it's nice to get out of your comfort zone and go to a conference and talk to people and interact. And I agree with both of you that this is the right move, but I just think that this is detrimental to the conference in a big way.
Yeah. I mean, other large conferences are doing the same thing too. I don't know if either of you have ever been to the Boston Flowers Show. It's a huge show at the Heinz Convention Center. It's beautiful. They closed 2 days early too, which is, I mean, that is an enormous convention for this kind of thing. But again, it's a prudent thing. But if large conferences are doing this in conventions, then I think it makes sense that smaller ones are doing that as well.
A colleague of my daughter's, her wedding was canceled for next weekend. The venue canceled the wedding.
Really?
Yeah.
But that, to be fair, that could also be due to the state. A lot of states and cities are
Massachusetts
limiting the number of people that can get together in one spot. I know the state of Rhode Island at least has done a cap of 250, but the city of Providence has done a cap of 100. So a lot of businesses, are affected by that as well.
So just encourage everyone, right, to not get upset. Understand this is the best thing for everyone right now, right? Let's these events will get rescheduled, things will change, but it really is a good thing to knock this thing down before it gets to be a huge problem. So
absolutely. So in that vein, right, we're talking about how this impacts, obviously impacts more than just the Drupal community. It's a global issue. How are you guys seeing this impact your clients?
So far, the biggest thing for me is that clients are just talking. It's kind of what we've been talking about. A lot of my clients, even though I'm remote, they aren't. So they're dealing with how to go remote and work from home when they usually don't do that. From my perspective, what that really has translated to is kind of two things. One is answers to my questions are a little bit slower in coming because they're dealing with other stuff internally, which is understandable. And of course, I'd rather my clients take care of their people before answering a question about what color a button should be. And the second thing is I've had a couple clients reach out and ask advice on remote tools, because obviously I've been fully remote. I've used almost every video tool under the sun. that's about it right now. I mean, I'm expecting far more significant changes in the coming weeks, but so far it's really just been people trying to figure out how to work remotely, asking questions. The last couple of weeks have been a little bit slow as people kind of transition from an office to homework.
So I think for us, it's been a little bit more. In our face. In a couple of areas. Clients have been asking for certain website updates because they need to, add an emergency alert banner, or they're using the emergency alert banner maybe for the first time, and they need some reminder on how to do that. Off deploy deployments. So we have deployment schedules, and sometimes things need to go out off deployment to support some of those updates.
Yep.
Also dealing with sick employees. Like if you have a person within your organization that's like critical to, your website project, that person gets sick. That's an issue. I think, where we're largely in, we're largely in the healthcare space. We're largely in the education space. Those are two areas where we're seeing a lot of our clients, as you said, Nick, being super busy, not getting back to those emails as quickly as possible. Also, in some instances, just straight up canceling meetings. Other educational institutions closing for a certain period of time. So, kind of dealing with the aftermath of that. I think one of the things that, everybody, and Steve alluded to this in our last segment, was, everybody needs to be understanding. Everybody's dealing with what they can deal with the best way that they can. So, being supportive is something that, we're definitely doing, but just basically understanding, like, okay, if you don't get to me today, tomorrow's not good. You'll get to me at some point. But, I want to turn it over to Steve, because Steve has a unique perspective here in working for the U.S. government, right? I imagine your day-to-day has kind of been crazy over the last couple of weeks.
So it's early stages for like these changes, right? It's only really been the last 3 or 4 days. So I can see from the government side, they're doing the agencies they're taking the proper steps to make sure everyone's taken care of properly, and that we're following the guidelines the best way we can, but also trying to balance that towards, things that people are going to be dealing with in life, right? Parents are going to have kids at home now because schools are closing down everywhere. Like a lot of the people I work with are in the Maryland area. Those schools are all closed. They were closed yesterday for 2 or 3 weeks. So there's all the struggles that everyone else has. The thing that just sticks out to me immediately is, I think we're in the second day of my team all working remotely. And for someone who's always remote, our scrum calls are usually very quick, like, hey, get on, get off, like they should be, get on with your day. They have been now more of the water cooler kind of conversation as well, because everyone else is now at home. They're not face to face at the water cooler. So I actually have seen it's been a more pleasant experience from my side. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops over a period of time. I don't know, Nick, if you've experienced that yet. With the more people being remote, their attitudes about the phone calls are very different.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on that. I mean, a lot of my clients, I don't do Scrum with too many of my clients. There's only a couple that I do that for. But I'll be curious to see how that picks up. But like I said, it's definitely one of the parts that I'm interested in, how people respond to this.
So at this point, I think we've talked about the business aspect. We talked about the clients. I'd like to wrap up the show with just some helpful tips that you may be able to use when you have to work from home. We talked a little earlier about Zoom. Obviously, in remote tools, Zoom and Slack are probably used the most, right? We also talked about Citrix, GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar. They have some pretty good services out there. Somebody put Skype in this list, which that's, I guess, up to you and your organization. As well,
you'd be surprised at the number of organizations that use Skype for business.
Oh dear.
Yep.
Federal government uses Skype.
What about Hangouts? Is anybody still using Hangouts?
I have a couple clients that use it. It used to be one of the best options. It is no longer one of the
I
best
find
options.
it every time someone calls me in a hangout, I spend the first 5 minutes trying to get it to work.
So
Yeah.
very, very interestingly, right? So the next thing on the list is Google Docs. Obviously, Google Docs is huge, super helpful. But noticed today, DocuSign, which is publicly traded, is actually up quite a bit on the stock exchange right now. So I'm wondering if that's more people signing up for accounts to get kind of that paperwork signed virtually as opposed to
actually that's funny. I signed a contract with a client. I had to re-sign a contract with a client this week, and they were like, so they emailed it to me. I had to print it off, sign it, scan it, send it back, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that this is so complicated. I bet you we're one of the only clients that you have to sign physical paper and scan." I was like, believe it or not, I have one client that uses DocuSign. 99% of my clients email me the contract and physically mail it.
I think most of the contracts I've signed in the past 5 years are DocuSign.
Almost none of my clients do that. They all just email it. And so, I mean, I wish people used it more. It's much easier.
I would say another tip, and this is something I've actually personally been looking into, is make sure you have a good internet connection. I do have a pretty good internet connection, but also make sure you have a backup. Make sure you have like a hotspot or you can tether to your cell phone, because if your internet goes down for some reason, you may still need to be working and be productive. And sometimes it's hard to do those things without the internet.
Something, as a long time work from home kind of person, something that took me a little while to get to, but once I did, vastly improved my productivity. Make sure you have an office space. Make sure you have a place in your home that is your workspace. Make sure that you have a place that you can kind of focus. Part of the ability to be productive at work is the commute kind of prepares you for work. You're in a different place. If you try to just keep working from wherever, from your living room couch or, from your bedroom or something like that, it's hard for you to kind of get in the work mode. I would definitely say, have a place where you have stuff set up. You have the things that you need nearby. It'll help you be more productive. And then when you're done with work, you can get up and leave that spot. So you're not like, if you're sitting in the living room, like it just becomes like work is everywhere. You don't have that come home from work mentality. So it's good to have a separate section.
It's interesting. Nick also talks about having work times, right? And one thing that we implemented recently, within probably last year actually, is flex time. So at Oomph, we have working hours. Everybody's expected to be around between 1 and 3 Eastern time, and then the rest of the day is flexible time. You can, as long as your calendar is up to date, you can work if you want to, or you can work at night or whatever. But I would say along with that, especially if you're new to working at home, communicate effectively. Make sure your calendar's up to date. Make sure if you're going out for lunch, you tell people, oh, hey, I'm going out for lunch. Because especially with new people to working remotely, somebody may be looking for you and be like, oh, where is this person? And it might be a frustration point or a friction point. So making sure communication, the lines of communication stay open and honest is important too, I think.
Something else to.
Can I interject there, please?
Yeah.
So John just was saying communication. So communication also needs to happen in the house. So I think Nick and I probably don't deal with this anymore because we've been doing it so long. But for someone who's usually at work and now is also in the house all day long, there's kids, family, and stuff that are there. So I would highly encourage sitting down and having a real frank conversation of, these are the times that I am not home. You have to pretend I'm not here. And it's unreasonable when you're putting yourself in that environment. Now you're with your family all day. It's unreasonable to say you can't talk to me from 8 to 5, but maybe what you can do is say, from 9 to 11 or 11:30, I am not here at all. You can't bother me for anything. And then maybe again from 2 to 4. And then maybe those other times during the day, yes, if you need me, come in and I can talk to you, whatever. But I think you need to have the frank conversation with your wife or your husband and make sure you set those boundaries so you can be successful at this and everyone knows what the situation is.
This harkens back to when we first bought our house. I took the door off my office because my office is relatively small. And I was like, oh, I'll take the door off because the door will be out of the way and like it'll feel a little bit more open. And today there's still no door in my office, but now I have 2 kids and a house with activity happening in it. So I agree with Steve on that. I typically, when I'm working from home, I'll set expectations like, listen, I've got 3 calls today. Here's what time they are. Just like, if you can keep it down during those times, good. Otherwise, like if you have a question, I can try to answer it or, whatever.
I think one of the final things I would say too is don't be afraid to take a break. One thing, people kind of tend to fall into 2 extremes when they start working from home. One is they're afraid that it's not going to look like they're busy. So they just end up working crazy hours. Right. They don't ever get up. They don't get a glass of water. They barely take a lunch, eat at their desk. You don't want to do that. That's not healthy either. Make sure you get up, stretch your legs a bit, get a snack, make sure you're working, but you're not a slave to your desk or your computer. The other side of it is you get home, you start working from home, you're ultra distracted, you have difficulty concentrating. And to those people that say that's fine, that's completely normal. But setting a routine, finding a place that's specifically for work, that kind of stuff will help you get to the position where you can just kind of sit down and get to work every day. I mean, it took me a little bit of time before I was used to the work from home. And so if it takes you a couple weeks or a couple months, I mean, that's perfectly reasonable as well. But just try set a routine, set a pattern, but don't go the other extreme. Don't like get up at 7 and work straight until 7 p.m. with only a 10-minute break to get lunch.
Don't be afraid to don't be afraid to grab your computer too and go work at a Starbucks for 2 or 3 hours in a day for just noise and people and stuff like that.
So someday I'll do that. I'll bring my desktop and my 4 monitors and hook it up on one of the tiny little single person desks. There's probably a lot of space at Starbucks right now. So, so if you have any questions or feedback, you can reach out to us on Twitter at Talking Drupal. You can always send us an email, show@talkingdrupal.com. We do read those, and we do them respond. You can always get show updates by signing up for our newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And super thanks to our patrons. If you'd like to become a patron, you can learn more about that at talkingdrupal.com. Click on the Become a Patron button. So thank you for joining us today. John Picozzi, where can people find you online?
Oh, man, you can find me on all the social networks at John Picozzi, and you can find out about Oomph and our new training at oomphinc.com/training.
How about you, Nick?
You can find me online pretty much everywhere at NixVan, NICXVAN.
And I'm Stephen Cross. I'm on Twitter at Stephen Cross with a PH. Take care, guys.
Have a good one.
Stay safe.
Remember, wash your damn hands.
Wash those damn hands.